The ink is drying on the page before he can even finish the sentence. The heat is that intense. It is 3 a.m. September 2nd, 1666. Thomas Knyght is standing on the corner of a narrow cobblestone street, and the soles of his boots are starting to smoke. He isn't a soldier. He isn't a fireman. He is a night watchman. For 20 years his job was simple. Walk the dark alleys of London, swing his iron lantern, and shout to the sleeping families that all is well. But tonight, nothing is well. Tonight, the lantern in his hand is useless because the sky is glowing a violent radioactive orange. Thomas is pressing a handkerchief to his face, trying to filter out the smell of burning tar and melting lead, scribbling his final observations into a leather logbook. He is the man who watched the world end. If you stand on that same corner today on the south bank of the Thames, you see steel and glass. You see the shard piercing the clouds. You see a modern metropolis that feels permanent. But if you could peel back the layers of time, you would see what Thomas saw. A bonfire waiting to happen. We found his words in the rubble. A charred diary buried under centuries of ash. This is not a history lesson. This is the autopsy of a city. To understand why Thomas Knyght was terrified, you have to understand the death trap he was patrolling. Imagine you are walking next to Thomas. It is August. You are in the heart of London. You look up expecting to see the moon, but you can't see the sky. You can't see the stars. The architecture was a disaster by design. They called them jetties. The ground floor of a house was narrow. The second floor stuck out a few feet further. The third floor stuck out even more. By the time you got to the top, the houses on opposite sides of the street were practically touching. They were kissing. This turned every single street in London into a tunnel, a wind tunnel, and it gets worse. London had been in a drought for 10 months. Everything was dry as bone, and to waterproof these wooden shacks, the people coated them in pitch. Tar, black, sticky, highly flammable tar. So you have dry wood, you have wind tunnels, and you have tar. London wasn't a city. It was a 40-mile stack of firewood soaked in gasoline just waiting for a spark. Thomas Knyght knew this. In his diary, he didn't call it a city. He called it the tinderbox. He knew it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. Now I have a question for you, and I want you to be honest. If you lived in a city made entirely of dry wood and suddenly in the middle of the night, someone screamed, "Fire!" what is the first thing you would grab? Would you grab your life savings? Or would you grab your family? Pause the video. Go to the comments. Type money or type family. Because what the people of London actually chose to save, well, that is the reason thousands of them didn't make it out. Go ahead, lock in your answer. And while you're down there, hit that subscribe button before it burns, because the spark is coming. And Thomas Knyght just smelled smoke. It is 10 o'clock at night. The bells of St. Mary Le Bow are tolling. Thomas Knyght steps out of the watch house and takes a deep breath. And what he smells isn't just sewage. If you stand with him near the wharves of the Thames, the air is thick with the smell of the world. He smells nutmeg and peppercorns from the East Indies. He smells curing tobacco from Virginia. He smells raw wool and expensive French wine. You have to remember, this city is an economic engine. As Thomas walks along the riverbank looking out at the water, he doesn't see an empty river. He sees a forest of masts. Hundreds of ships are docked here, tangled together, bobbing in the tide. This is the artery of the empire. Even at night it is loud. You can hear the wherry men, the water taxi drivers shouting at each other in the dark, their oars slapping the black water. Thomas turns away from the river and heads north into the maze. To you and me, these streets would look confusing. But Thomas knows the rhythm of every neighborhood. He knows that London is actually a collection of little villages smashed together. He walks up Fish Street Hill. This is the highway to London Bridge. He stops for a moment to look at the bridge. It is the only way across the river. And it isn't just a bridge. It is a street hovering over the water. It is lined with houses, shops on the bottom, families living on top 6 stories high. Thomas loves the bridge. He loves how, if you stand still, you can feel the whole structure vibrate, because the arches are so narrow the river roars through them like a waterfall. It is the heartbeat of the city. He continues his patrol into the city center. He passes Lombard Street. This is where the money lives. The houses here are different. They are grander. The timber frames are carved into intricate patterns. Lions, unicorns, grapes. Behind these heavy oak shutters, goldsmiths are counting coins. This is the birthplace of modern banking. Thomas runs his hand along a polished door frame. He knows there is more wealth in this one street than in the entire countryside of England. But London isn't just about work. It is about the noise. Thomas turns a corner near the Royal Exchange and hears a roar of voices spilling out of a doorway. It is a coffee house. In 1666, these places were the internet. They called them penny universities. You paid a penny for a cup of black sludge that tasted like syrup of soot and the essence of old shoes, but you didn't go for the taste. You went for the news. Thomas peeks through the window. The room is filled with smoke from clay pipes. He sees merchants arguing about the price of silk. He sees scientists, virtuosos, they called them, drawing diagrams of the stars. He sees writers and radicals shouting about the king. This is what Thomas loves, the energy. The fact that at midnight on a Monday the city is still arguing, trading, and living. He walks deeper toward Cheapside. Here the street widens. This is the main shopping district. Above his head, the signs creak in the wind. In 1666, houses didn't have numbers, they had signs. The Golden Key, the Three Nuns, the Black Bear. It is a gallery of art hanging above the street. Thomas looks up at the windows. The glass is expensive, glittering in the moonlight. He sees the flower boxes on the balconies, dry and withered now from the drought, but still there. People tried to make this place beautiful. He passes a tavern. A fiddle is playing. He hears the clinking of pewter mugs and a burst of laughter. This is the tragedy of London. It wasn't a rotting corpse. It was warm. It was made of wood, yes, but that wood was carved, polished, and loved. It was a cozy, overcrowded, loud, obnoxious, brilliant city. Thomas feels a sense of ownership. These are his streets, his people. He reaches the end of his loop near Pudding Lane. The wind is picking up now, rustling the dry leaves in the gutter. He looks at the skyline. It is a jagged row of gabled roofs, sharp and black against the stars, dominated by the massive, hulking shadow of St. Paul's Cathedral in the distance. It feels permanent. It feels like it has been here for 1,000 years and will be here for 1,000 more. Thomas checks his pocket watch. It is just past 1 a.m. He thinks the night is effectively over. The taverns are closing. The coffee houses are emptying. The city is finally going to sleep. He sits down on his crate to write his entry. He describes the wind. He notes a fight he broke up near the bridge. He writes that the city is peaceful. He has no idea that 50 feet away inside the bakery of Thomas Farriner, a single spark has just rolled out of the oven and into a pile of brushwood. The city is alive. But it has 1 hour left to live. It starts as a whisper. Thomas Knyght is sitting on his crate, the ink still wet on his page, describing the peaceful night. He is listening to the wind rattle the sign of a nearby tavern. Then the smell changes. Now you have to understand 17th century London always smelled like smoke. Every house heated with coal or wood. Every workshop had a forge. The air was practically chewable on a normal day. But this smell is different. Thomas stops writing. He lifts his head. It doesn't smell like the acrid, sulfurous coal smoke that usually hung over the city. It smells like bread, burnt bread, and dry, resinous pine. He stands up. He looks down the dark tunnel of Pudding Lane. At the far end, maybe 100 yards away, he sees it. A faint, pulsing orange glow leaking through the cracks of a window shutter on the second floor. It is the home of Thomas Farriner, the king's baker. Farriner was a good man. A respected man. He made the hardtack biscuits for the Royal Navy. Earlier that night, Farriner had checked his oven. He had raked the coals. He had done what he did every single night for 20 years. He swore the fire was out. He was wrong. Inside the bakery, while the Fariner family slept upstairs, a single ember had managed to survive. It pulsed in the darkness, waiting. Eventually, it popped out of the hearth. It landed on a pile of brushwood twigs and dry sticks used to start the oven. If this had happened in a modern house, a smoke alarm would scream. You'd wake up, grab a fire extinguisher, and that would be the end of the story. But this is 1666. There are no alarms. There is only the wind and the wood. The brushwood catches. Then the fire finds the flour sacks. Now, here is a terrifying fact about flour. When it sits in a sack, it is just powder. But when flour dust kicks up into the air and meets a flame, it acts like gunpowder. It doesn't just burn, it flashes. Thomas Knyght starts running toward the glow. By the time he gets to the bakery, the orange light isn't pulsing anymore. It is steady, and it is growing brighter by the second. He bangs on the door. He blows his whistle, the shrill sound cutting through the quiet street. Upstairs, the Fariner family wakes up choking. The smoke is already thick, filling the room like black wool. They are trapped. The stairs, their only exit, are made of wood, and they are already a pillar of fire. This is the moment the monster is born. And I want you to picture this fire not as a chemical reaction, but as a living thing, a predator, because that is how Thomas describes it in the later pages of his log. He watches as the Fariner family climbs out of an upper window. They have to crawl across the roof gutter to the neighbor's house to escape. But one of them, the maid, is too scared to jump. Thomas watches helpless from the street below. He sees her silhouette against the orange window. He hears her scream, and then the floor gives way and the scream stops. She becomes the first victim, the first of many. But the fire isn't interested in just one house. It is hungry, and the wind is feeding it. This is where the architecture of London, those beautiful, charming jetties we talked about, turns into a weapon. Thomas looks up. The flames from the bakery burst out of the windows, but they don't go straight up into the sky. The gale-force wind catches them and throws them sideways. The fire acts like a blowtorch. It blasts across the narrow gap of the street. Remember, the houses are only feet apart at the top, and sets the roof of the house opposite the bakery on fire. Now the fire is on both sides of the street. It has formed an archway of flame, a tunnel of heat. Thomas is shouting for help now. People are stumbling out of their homes half-dressed, rubbing sleep from their eyes. They are confused. They grab buckets. They run to the water pumps. But the pumps are dry. The drought has killed the water pressure. Thomas tries to organize a bucket line to the river, but he realizes quickly that it is useless. The heat is rising so fast it feels like a physical weight pressing against his chest. When they throw water at the bakery, the water evaporates before it even touches the timber. The fire moves from the bakery to the courtyard of the Star Inn. The courtyard is filled with hay and straw for the horses. Boom. It goes up like a bomb. The fire is no longer walking. It is sprinting. It moves down Pudding Lane toward Fish Street Hill. And this is the moment Thomas Knyght realizes the true horror of the situation. Fish Street Hill leads directly to the riverfront. And what is stored at the riverfront? Warehouses. Hundreds of wooden warehouses packed floor to ceiling with the most flammable materials known to man. There are barrels of pitch, casks of brandy, vats of oil, hemp ropes, coal, tallow, gunpowder. Thomas watches the fire turn the corner. He sees the wind push the sparks onto the thatched roof of a warehouse. He writes, "It did not spread. It jumped." Like a demon leaping from rooftop to rooftop. When the fire hits the warehouse district, the color of the flame changes. It stops being the orange of burning wood. It turns into a blinding chemical white. The barrels of oil burst. The brandy ignites. A river of liquid fire spills out of the warehouses and runs down the street, flowing toward the Thames. The sound changes too. It stops crackling. It begins to roar. Thomas compares it to the sound of 1,000 thunderstorms happening all at once. The radiant heat is so intense that buildings 50 feet away, which haven't even been touched by the flames yet, simply burst into spontaneous combustion. The air itself is burning. Thomas Knyght stands his ground for as long as he can, shielding his face with his coat. He sees a pigeon flying overhead. The heat is so intense that the bird's wings catch fire in midair. It drops like a stone into the inferno. The wind is now blowing at gale force, creating a vacuum effect. The fire is sucking oxygen out of the side streets, pulling the flames deeper and deeper into the city. Thomas looks back at the bakery where it all started. It is gone, a skeleton of ash. He looks forward toward the heart of London, toward the wealth of Lombard Street, toward the history of St. Paul's, and he realizes that the patrol is over. The investigation is over. The evacuation has begun. He clutches his logbook to his chest, turns his back to the wind, and begins to run. But as he runs, he realizes the fire is faster than he is. It is racing him to the city gates, and the monster is winning. It is Tuesday, September 4th. The fire has been feeding for 3 days. Thomas Knyght is no longer running. He is stumbling. He has been awake for 60 hours. His coat is singed. His eyebrows are gone. He is standing at the top of Cheapside looking west. Most of the city he patrolled on Sunday night doesn't exist anymore. The rats, the smells, the crowded alleys, they are just ash. But there is one hope left. One building that everyone believes is invincible. Old St. Paul's Cathedral. You have to understand the scale of this place. It was massive. It towered over the wooden shacks of the city like a mountain. And crucially, it was made of stone. Thick, ancient, medieval stone. Thomas watches as thousands of refugees flock toward it. It is a scene of biblical desperation. But it isn't just people. It is the history of England. The booksellers from Paternoster Row, the street right next to the cathedral, have spent the last 24 hours frantically carting their inventory into the church. They have filled the crypt, a massive underground vault known as St. Faith's, with millions of pounds worth of books, manuscripts, and legal records. They believe the crypt is a bunker. They believe the stone walls will protect their livelihood. Thomas watches them stack the books floor to ceiling. He sees the stationer's company seal the heavy doors. They are confident. They tell each other stone doesn't burn. But Thomas looks up, and he sees what they have forgotten. Old St. Paul's had been neglected for decades. It was falling apart. So just a few months prior, the city had surrounded it with wooden scaffolding to make repairs. The cathedral is wrapped in a cage of timber. Thousands of tons of dry, seasoned wood climbing all the way to the tower. And the roof? It isn't stone. It is acres of lead sheeting over ancient oak beams. Thomas writes in his logbook with a trembling hand. They have not packed a vault. They have packed an oven. At 8 p.m. on Tuesday, the fire jumps the street. It hits the scaffolding first. The dry timber acts like a wick. The fire races up the side of the cathedral, climbing hundreds of feet in minutes. The crowd watches in silence. The mountain is burning. And then the horror begins. The heat becomes so intense that the lead roof begins to melt. Thomas is watching from a safe distance, but he can see the glow. He describes a sight that defies physics. The lead doesn't just drip, it flows. A glittering silver river of molten metal pours from the roof gutters. It cascades down the sides of the building, splashing onto the cobblestones. The river of silver flows down Cheapside, consuming everything in its path. The pavement glows red hot. If you stepped in it, you didn't just burn, you dissolved. Inside the cathedral, the heat is building pressure. The heavy stones of the walls, superheated by the fire and then cooled by the wind, start to verify. They explode. Thomas covers his ears. The sound is like cannon fire. Huge chunks of masonry shrapnel from the cathedral walls are blasting into the street. And then the floor gives way. The burning roof, the molten lead, and the exploding stones all crash down straight into the crypt of St. Faith's. Remember the books, the millions of pages of history? They ignite instantly. The fire burns with such ferocity that it creates its own weather system, a fire tornado. The updraft sucks the pages of burning books up into the sky. Thomas watches as the history of his city rains down on him. Charred pages of Bibles, half-burnt contracts, science journals and plays drift down like black snow. People reported catching burnt pages of books as far away as Eton, over 20 miles to the west. The living room of London is gone. The marketplace, the gossip hub, the center of the world. It is now just a hollow, glowing shell. Thomas turns the page of his diary. His hand is shaking so badly the ink splatters across the paper. He writes a single final observation for the night, a eulogy for his city. God has left London, and he has taken the library with him. He closes the book. The heat is too much now. He turns away from the ruin of St. Paul's and walks toward the river. There is nothing left to patrol. There is nothing left to save. The fire will burn for another day. But the spirit of the city died tonight. Thursday, September 6th. The wind dies. After 4 days of screaming fury, the silence that falls over London is louder than the fire ever was. Thomas Knyght walks back into the city, but he isn't walking on cobblestones anymore. He is walking on a layer of ash and charcoal that is in some places 5 feet deep. It is like walking through black snow. He reaches the spot where his watch house used to be. It is gone. He reaches the spot where the Royal Exchange stood. Gone. He looks for the spires of 87 different churches. They are all gone. The scale of the destruction is hard to process. In 4 days, the fire consumed 13,000 houses. It destroyed the business district, the government, the cathedral, and the homes of nearly 100,000 people. If you look at a map of medieval London and put a coin over the center, everything under that coin has been erased. Thomas finds a place to sit near the ruins of the Guildhall. The stone walls are still glowing red days later. He opens his logbook. It is charred at the edges. The leather binding is warped from the heat. He doesn't write about the buildings this time. He writes about the people. He describes the fields of misery outside the city walls. Tens of thousands of Londoners are camping in the open fields of Moorfields and Highgate. They have nothing, no clothes, no food, no money. The richest merchants in the world are now begging for a crust of bread alongside the poorest laborers. But here is the strangest part of Thomas's final entry. He writes about the air. For the first time in his life, he takes a deep breath and he doesn't cough. The fire was a tragedy, yes, but it was also a sterilization. The intense heat burned away the filth. It boiled the sewage in the kennels. It incinerated the rats. And crucially, it killed the plague. The Black Death, which had been lurking in the timber walls and the dirty straw for centuries, was burned out of existence. The fire that killed the city actually saved the future. Thomas closes the book. He leaves us with one final thought. He wonders if the city will ever return. He wonders if London is dead forever. He was wrong about that. London didn't die. It rebooted. King Charles II and a genius architect named Christopher Wren immediately drew up plans for a new city. They wanted wide Italian-style piazzas. They wanted straight boulevards. They wanted a grid system like New York or Paris. But the people of London said no. They were stubborn. They went back to their piles of ash, found the exact spot where their front door used to be, and they started digging. They rebuilt their houses on the exact same medieval footprints. And that is why, if you look at a map of London today, the streets are still a tangled, confused mess. The ghost of 1666 dictated the layout of the modern city, but they did change one thing. They passed a law. No more wood, no more jetties, no more tunnels. The new London was built of brick and stone. It rose from the ashes, whiter, cleaner, and safer. A phoenix rising. But what about Thomas Knyght? We don't know when he died. His name fades from the parish records a few years later, but his diary remains. And here is the secret that most tourists walking around London today don't know. When they rebuilt the city, they didn't clear all the rubble away. It was too much. Instead, they often just leveled it out and built on top of it. If you are walking near St. Paul's today, or crossing London Bridge, or buying a coffee on Lombard Street, you are walking about 6 to 10 feet above the streets that Thomas Knyght patrolled. Beneath your feet, encased in the earth, is a layer of black charcoal. Archaeologists call it the destruction layer. Down there in the dark, the old city is still waiting. The melted keys, the shattered pottery, the skeletons of the rats, and the ghost of the wooden world. Thomas Knight's diary is the only map we have to that lost kingdom. He captured the smell, the noise, and the terror of the week the world burned. So the next time you see a picture of the London skyline, don't just look at the skyscrapers. Look at the spaces in between. Look at the ground. And remember the man who stood in the fire pen in hand, refusing to look away so that we wouldn't forget. So that was the story of Thomas Knyght and the Great Fire. Now I want to go back to that question I asked you at the beginning. Money or family? It turns out in 1666, a lot of people chose money. There are accounts of people digging holes in their gardens to bury wheels of cheese wine and gold while the fire raged closer. The famous diarist Samuel Pepys, a real historical figure, literally buried his Parmesan cheese to save it. Priorities, right? If you enjoyed this deep dive into history's hottest week, do me a favor. Hit the like button. It tells the algorithm that we need to tell more stories like this. And if you want to know about the other time London was almost destroyed, not by fire, but by beer. Yes, really? The Great Beer Flood? Let me know in the comments below. I'm your host. This has been the channel. And remember, stay safe and check your smoke alarms.